Who wishes not to be erudite this morning? Unless erudition be reflected in that percussion we were just hearing, right? So the words were simple enough, but think of that percussion. Different rhythms going on at once, kind of sounding effortless. There was probably a lot of craft that went into it. But what I'm really wanting to touch on this morning is a kind of magic that's like the sound of that music that all of us can sing along to without being erudite. So really, if erudition is a characteristic indulgence of mine with my different degrees and endeavors, this morning what I want to do is to try to get to a space that's very different from that. Sometimes it's easier to talk about other people's lives than our own. Don't you find that to be the case? Especially when there are, let's say, challenging transitions involved. Is that too erudite, or can we get by that? So many of us have known people and sometimes had close friends that will bring their difficulties to us and that we can lend a sympathetic ear. And that's a great thing about friendship. And sometimes we find that the same kinds of things are being shared over and over by the same people. Do you find that sometimes? And I think, as a friend who does that talking as well as on the listening side of that, I do it too. So one time, a little while back, I had a friend that was in a situation like that. As he was talking with me, it became just absolutely clear to me, this isn't his problem. This is something that happened a long time ago, and it was somebody else's problem. But his problem was that he couldn't let go of it, and he knew that it wasn't his problem. He could tell you intellectually and consciously, I didn't do anything wrong. It was this other person who's now dead. Which makes it a little harder to have that great hug that resolves everything, right? But he understood all that, and so I used a phrase in talking with him. I just said, all you need to do is break the spell. And sometime later, that came back to me, and I realized that I might have said something important to myself. That in me as well, there are patterns that I fall into where I get stuck, where I'm doing the same thing through my whole life, or at least my whole adult life. And in my particular case, that has a lot to do with jobs, with employment, with getting along with people who in some respects may have a different view of the world from me, but to whom I am responsible, right? Some of you can relate to that. For other people, it may be that there's something in relationships, that we keep falling into those same patterns. Perhaps in romantic relationships. There are all sorts of different ways. Because I believe that each of us has different parts of ourselves. There's a part of me that really wants to just shine like the light of 1,000 stars, like the lyric of Instant Karma by John Lennon that we all shine on. And there's a part of me that doesn't want to scare people too badly because I get in trouble when I turn all my lights on. Can somebody relate to that? So most of my adult life, I have felt like I'm a sports car driving in the wrong gear. It's like I've got a Maserati and I'm trying to get to Gainesville through these little speed traps. So instead of driving myself to what I'm capable of, I've found different ways through my adult life to kind of not upset people too badly as I act like a jalopy. But I'm better than that. And I know I'm better than that. And so comes a time when I really want to turn myself loose to what I know I not only can be, but what I already am. I want to feel my life unfolding into the fullness of my potential. And that seems like a very fair and natural thing for all of us, doesn't it? When I think of my granddaughter Molly, just born, and the life that might be ahead of her, I don't want her to have to hold back. I don't want her to have to restrict what she's able to be as a person in order to satisfy the critics in any particular discipline, for instance. So what I want to speak to this morning is a perspective that relates very much to what we might call magic. I like magic. There are a lot of things I like about magic, and I find as I reflect on this that I already am a magician. And part of what we'll be looking at this morning is when we're in a magic trick and we've forgotten we're in a magic trick and we haven't finished the magic trick, how do we get back to that magic? So if you'll join me in enjoying that kind of magic this morning, what we can do is look to a way of moving forward into our fullness that does not depend on us being erudite. And it does not depend on us doing hard and extended analytic work where all the wounds come open. Where it might just be that without any great intellectual or conscious effort, we already know. Our bodies know. Our senses know. The part of us that knows that we're ready now to move forward in ways we might not have been long ago. That part of us may already know the magic that we need to know. And that's where we'll be this morning. As I take a drink of water, I noticed that as my mouth was dry, I didn't have to think about something. This wasn't a symptom. But as I took the water in, that my body knows exactly what to do with it and where it needs to go and what happens when it's finished with it as well. That's part of the treatment. So today, as I try to bring us to a different perspective on how to think about these things, I want to begin by that notion of breaking the spell. What does it mean to be under a spell? And what's a spell like anyway? In one sense, when I'm under a spell, I feel like I'm not the one who's doing anything. I might not have a sense of objectively what's real. But to be under a spell is at least in part to feel like this is imposed on me. It's coming from the outside, right? If I were just doing it, I wouldn't describe it that way at all. So one of the things we're going to want to do is to take that feeling of, well, this is just how it is, or this is imposed on me, and we're going to want to bring it back to a point where it's part of me that I can change. It's something I'm doing in myself. And if I can bring that around to that point where I'm doing it in myself, well, if I'm doing it, I can do it differently. And if I can do it differently, then I can change what that pattern is. And if I can change that pattern, well, of course, I have the resources to bring about the direction of that work and that change that will be helpful for me. So if we want to lift the spell when it isn't helping us anymore, and part of us knows when that is, when that time has come. But I know I have spells of all kinds. I have trance states of all kinds almost every day of my life. So it's not that spells are bad things, as Richards and wizards and witches among us know. It's not that spells are bad things. It's that there may be with certain ones a time that comes when we want to change that, or when it's time for some new trance or unleashing of energies. So I bet you have your own ways of going into trances. Are there any of you who are avid readers? When I read The Pillars of the Earth, we had out-of-town company, and getting me even to the dinner table was like dragging a 14-year-old from a video game. I was so locked into that world that the other things around me that were supposed to be important, that were objectively important, just became not a meaningful part of my attention span when I was in the world of that book. Or here's one of my favorites, is I get absorbed in music. All kinds of different music. It could be like that percussion behind the lyrics that we were just singing. It could be a classical piece. It could be folk. It could be jazz. It could be rock. For me, music is something that captivates me in a lot of different ways. Many of us are captivated by the beauty of nature, aren't we? That there are times when, like the lyrics of that earlier responsive reading, we're just caught up in a sunset or some spectacle. Jack, I bet when you were in Ireland, you saw at least one thing that caught you that way, huh? So there are many, many different ways that all of us get caught up in something like a trance. Our attention focuses in on something, other things kind of fall away, and within that state, it may be quite enjoyable, but there may also come a time when I really need to put that book down, right? Even if I haven't finished the book. The great thing about it is, as readers learn to read and live in the same life, you realize eventually if it's a good book you're going to finish it, and then you can blend that with other things. And so that's part of what we're talking about this morning too, is the ability to blend that trance with the parts of my life moving forward that I need as part of the whole person that I am and want to be and need to be. So in all those ways I can be enthralled. And we also know that in and through those natural states, I don't have to do anything. There are incredibly complex skills and vocabularies involved in reading a book like that. But at my age, with my knowledge of language, I don't have to do it. All I need to do is pick up the book and start at a certain point. It pulls me along, right? I don't have to think about the English language, and it's a good thing. From what I understand about people trying to learn this crazy language we speak with native ease. What we want is to get in touch with that native ease, that what we've grown up with, that what goes back in our lives is just a part of who we already are. That's the resource that we want to turn loose for whatever we're moving forward into. So just as I can be absorbed in that way, without my intellect being too big a part of that, I can absorb what's good to me. For instance, I might be really absorbed. Another kind of trance I get into is when there's a speaker who's talking about something that's of particular interest to me. I may find that I am really concentrating and focusing on what the person is saying. But I also may find that instead of focusing intellectually on each word, that there's a part of me that will absorb into my memory and retain what is good for me to know. There's a part of me that almost intuitively can take in from what's being said, what's good for me to move forward with, and retain what's good, just like I retain what I need from the water that I'm having a sip of when my mouth gets dry. So for me, that's another kind of trance in moving forward. So there's a spell we want to break, but I can use trance too. And that can even be a kind of magic, can it? As we know, when we get into the dream state, dreams are kind of like magic, aren't they? Dreams are things where they can come over us like a spell. There's some people who do what's called lucid dreaming. Have you heard of that? There are people who can actually make in their dreams have whatever changes they want to have. They can direct the lives within their dreams. And they can do that in the same way that a play director might move the actors about on the stage. But for most of us who aren't lucid dreamers, we don't need to know how to move that action, do we? Because the dream has its own way of unfolding. And it's a dream. It doesn't have to make sense, does it? So it's not our intellect that the dream is for, right? Something's going on when we dream, or we wouldn't dream. We know that. We know there's some good to it, or it wouldn't be happening. We know that. But we also know that it's not for our intellect that the dreams are happening. And so just as a dream is a kind of spell in that respect, where we don't need to know at the level of erudition what is going on, so in the kind of trance states that I'm talking about, we may be moving forward. We may be changing in ways that in the intellect we're not even aware of because, as we'll see later and in more importance, we don't need to know that. So it's a little bit like a secret cell of UU operatives in a place like Palatka. You don't know any more than you need to know. But you do know what you need to know, and you experience what you need to experience when we come here together. And that's the point of our worship together in days like today. So we know we might go into a dream state, and that when the time is right, even before we go into that dream state, before we go to sleep, we know we're going to wake up when the time is right. We may not know exactly when that is. It may be when the alarm goes off, or maybe before that. Some people don't have to set an alarm because for some people, the knowledge of when the right time is just something that sometimes we have already within us. And so we know that in any case, whatever dreams are important, whatever dreams may have a meaning somewhere for some part of us, that those dreams are going to find their time in our sleep without us having to choose it. Whether or not we do anything special like that lucid dreamer, or whether we might just be like leaves on a stream, just drifting along with it without having to give any effort at all. Let me give you an example just from ordinary everyday perception. I might have a way of looking at a picture, looking at what's before me that involves me being locked into seeing this in a certain way. I may look at it and I may say, well, here is a face that's looking this way. And here is a face that's looking this way. And these faces are opposite. These faces are opposing each other. They're facing off. And I may be locked into that way of seeing it, and maybe there's darkness over this one and darkness over this one, and that's all I can see. But there may also be another picture there that some part of me knows I'm ready to see it a different way. And so have you seen that figure where instead of the two faces, it doesn't take much of a shift at all, does it? It takes just the slightest little, I hadn't thought of looking at it that way. And we all know that that small kind of shift in perception can happen anytime. But when we look at it differently, now the figure in the ground change. And instead of two faces, what's in the middle? A vase is often what's drawn in the middle. A vase that's a space where the faces were, so that instead of invading toward that center, now it's the kind of space in which a flower might open and bloom. It's a space that becomes the center that gathers everything into that opening bouquet. And so now I'm seeing things in a completely different way. But it wasn't because I broke down all the aspects of the situation. It wasn't because I really tried to understand those faces and get their points of view, was it? It's because I simply let my senses shift the picture. And of course that's an analogy, but much of what we do is analogy. Many of our dreams work by analogy. There's a kind of analogy in our language that builds up even the simplest parts of what we use, whether we're erudite or not. And so associations and similarities are just a big part of how our minds and our whole persons work in the medium of language that's so much a part of us, even in simple ways that we've known from childhood. So now I see, now it might be that that shift happens all at once. It might be I come back to it later after having been puzzled by what was there. Let me give you another example of that from perception. I absolutely love these things. Isn't that great? If you're looking at it, you're thinking, he's an abstract art fan. I can be an abstract art fan. I love certain abstract art, but that's not what this is. This was marketed in a lot of different ways. Posters, calendars, whatever, as the magic eye. And there's a trick to it. There's a really deliberate process by which they make these things. But once you are able to relax into seeing it, you see something that's not there, or something that seems not to be there. So this is what I'm going to do with my magic eye. I'm going to pass this around.
Some people hate those things. That has cost me hours of my life.
This is perfect. magic tricks that are other people's magic and not yours. And there's some magic that comes easily. Is there anybody who's done this easily? Okay.
Yeah, with the number and all that, the color.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass it around. We're not in a hurry. I'll get it back after the service, however that turns out. But see if you can answer the question, what is that a picture of? Okay? The deconstructionist in me would get very erudite. I'm just asking, what is it? So why do I love that thing? I love that thing because if we look at the surface and we assume that information comes to us, visual information, meaning what this is about, comes to us in the standard kinds of ways. By looking in the accustomed way, we will not see it. I'll give you a little clue. There are two things that work for me if I do them both at once. One is to look just past the surface. Look into a little bit of a dimension of depth that normally I don't even think about. The other is not to work at it, not to concentrate, but to relax my vision. Because when it works, it just stabilizes as clear as a bell. It's not like you have to kind of squint like, really hard. Look at it, come on, dear me. It doesn't work like that. Let me give you one other example that's not from perception, just about how things can, in an easy way, come clearer in our experience, or where we don't need all that intellectual stuff to move along on our way. Let's say I'm on a path. Let's say you're on a path. Let's say along that pathway we're having a conversation. We might be talking and you might be completely absorbed in what I'm saying. You might be taking in what I'm saying and your attention's on what I'm doing in whatever way works for you, but we're still moving forward, aren't we? It's not like you had to stop in order to have a conversation. Well, some people maybe do, and I shouldn't when I'm driving, actually, but let's say we're walking along the path. And so we can focus on each other. You can be absorbed and take in everything that you need to take in, everything that's good for you and what I'm saying, and at the same time be moving forward on your path. And so our bodies, our senses can know how to move forward without having to understand everything else. We don't have to stop and go, oh, wait a minute, was I on my left foot or my right foot? Because if we had to think about everything we did, it would just be too hard. Anyway, the Taoist in me says that's a matter of gospel. So if we take as clues to what we might be able to do in the way of magic, if we take as clues the magic eye, where we can shift and see a whole different picture, certainly the faces and the vase, which almost any of us, I think, can do, and then how we can talk while we walk in simple matters of coordination. Now we can go back to that idea of magic and look at it in a different way. Suppose that a wizard had turned you into a frog. Or you thought you were a frog, which for you is the same thing if you think you're a frog. Right? So you might read a book, because there are lots of books published on how to turn yourself from a frog into a human being. You might take college courses in it. You might exercise long and hard. I might say, this is just something you have to work at. It takes practice sometimes, but what you need to do is you need to really think about degreening your skin. I might say, what you need to do is take those little froggy legs and just press up. Every day you got to do your exercises with those little froggy legs, and then they're going to turn into human. Wouldn't it be easier just to remember you're not a frog? Like when my sister was hypnotized, she used to be a smoker, and when she was hypnotized, she quit smoking, and then it was, well, why would I want to smoke? I'm not a smoker. So the effect of the hypnosis was that before the hypnosis, she was a smoker. She was not a smoker after the hypnosis, so who she was changed. It wasn't just a habit, it was a self-definition. So we impose on ourselves those post-hypnotic suggestions sometimes. We tell ourselves who we are and what we are, and those things can be told to us by others and absorbed by us and repeated by us through a whole lifetime. And that's part of the magic that we need to change, isn't it? So, if a spell is like a dream, and a dream can change all the time, if we can change even without lucid dreaming, because we know just as dreams change, the spell can be lifted. It's nothing permanent, it's nothing about who we really are, is it? Then it may be that since we don't need to understand, all we need to do is to believe that it's possible. Now, some of you in this room may be old enough to remember Tinkerbell. And I don't want to get too erudite here, but I do have to occasionally draw in my intellectual sources, and Tinkerbell is my authority on magic. I'm not going to ask you to say out loud, because I know at heart we're all children. At heart, I know everyone in this room can help Tinkerbell. I know everybody in this room could help Tinkerbell. And so you don't even have to say it out loud. I'll say it for you. I believe in magic. And I know I'm speaking for all of you because of all the magic we have in our lives. Or if you need a more contemporary philosopher than Tinkerbell, another of my favorite theorists of magic is John Sebastian, who I believe it was in his, I don't know, it might have been his very first publication, was "The magic's in the music, and the music's in me. Do you believe in magic?" So the magic of music for me, John Sebastian, Tinkerbell, those are the only authorities that I need on magic. So if we do believe, as John Sebastian or Tinkerbell would have us do, if I believe in magic, then all I have to do is to go along with the magic that's already happening, that I'm already in the middle of. And let me tell you what I learned from a movie as I was putting the sermon together a little while back. The movie The Prestige is one of two movies that came out about the same time that were about magic. I learned from that movie that for a magic act, there are 3 stages to how that magic unfolds. The first is the pledge. I will tell you what's going to happen. I am going to, for example, in the movie, I'm going to make myself disappear and then reappear. So, number 1, the pledge. Then the second thing that happens is called the turn, which may be preceded by words like, "Now you see it," and then what's going to follow that is the
Now you don't.
"Now you don't." That's the turn right there, okay? Now you see it, now you don't. That's the flip, that's the turn. And what magicians typically do to set up the turn is they trick us before they've done the trick. And the way they trick us is they say, "Watch closely." That's so important. That is so spiritual. That is so you. That is a trick. I mean, there are 50 sermons, and that is a trick. Okay? Why? When I concentrate, when I watch closely, did you know that the word concentrate means to make small? I'm making my awareness smaller. That world in the book may seem huge, but in the real world, if you will, my awareness is zoomed down on this little thing I'm holding in my hand. Hands are scrolling through. I make my awareness small by concentrating. So when the magician tells us, "Watch closely," she's setting us up to miss the larger context of what's really happening, isn't she? And that's what we do. But, you know, there are times I've wanted to make somebody disappear. Do you ever want that? Well, not forever. When I was a kid, I didn't have all the wherewithal that I have now as a grown-up, and so there were a whole lot of things I just couldn't influence in the ways I might like to, and so when I was a kid, there was a whole lot of stuff I'd like to at least make go away one way or another, right? So perhaps part of what I did when I was a kid, when some of that stuff was too big for me, maybe I just learned how to do that part of the trick. Maybe I just learned how to make stuff, not like you're dead or something like that. I wasn't a child axe murderer, don't get me wrong. But maybe I learned how to turn some stuff off, in my experience of it, right? Maybe I learned how to take myself out of that picture. Or maybe I learned how to change the picture around me somehow. There may be all kinds of different magic that I learned as a young person. It may be that people were telling me things that weren't really what I believed about myself, and I had to find some way to make a match up well enough to go on with my life. And so it may be that there was magic that was really, really good for me. But it may also be that now that I'm all kinds of full of wherewithals, as a big old grown-up, that I really don't need those things anymore. It may be that I've outgrown that stage of the magic trick. It may be that what I need to do, whatever that bunny rabbit is that disappeared, maybe I need to make that bunny rabbit that I look forward to at Easter. That's such a fun, magical kind of creature. Maybe I need to make that bunny rabbit disappear, maybe reappear. I'm sorry. No offense, bunny. Maybe what I really want to do is I know it's time to bring the bunny back. So what interested me as I was reading all my books and absorbing all the wisdom from philosophy, spirituality, personality theory, hypnosis, etc., is how to bring the bunny back. And part of what I learned is that the way we exercise that magic is to realize that it's already there. It never really went away, right? It's not the kind of magic where it really, literally, in reality, objectively, as studied by scientists, went into a different dimension. That's not what happened. What happened was that in my experience, I put it in a different dimension. It might not have seemed quite safe for that bunny at that time. So I sent the bunny into hiding. Hey, but now I can go ollie income free. It's okay. I'm an adult now. I can take care of you. You don't have to hide. And so now, for me to bring that experience back in, it may be that the thing I need to do is not to try to understand anything. This is the coolest thing of all. I don't need to believe that I have a problem. I don't need to understand what's happened in my past. I don't have to re-experience anything. I don't have to analyze or understand in my mind a single thing, because my body, my senses know what is really there. Just like when I have a sip of water. My body knows what's absorbed from that. So, my body, my senses know what's real and what's available to me. We don't have to call it the unconscious. We can just say that there's a part of me that knows better than my mind does. What is available to me that I might have put aside somewhere else and in some almost deliberate way forgotten about. There's a part of me that knows how to bring that bunny back. And you might say, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Mark, you're about the oldest guy in the room, but you know what? This old dog was meant to do those tricks. I've been doing those tricks since I was a pup. And we know a dog can bring a rabbit home, and if a dog can bring a rabbit home, then this old dog was built to do this trick. I just need to go back and finish it. So here's what we do. The short and simple way to put it is it's just mindfulness. How am I still doing the turn? How am I hiding the bunny? What am I still doing in what psychologists might call symptoms? How do I do that? And all I need to do is be grounded in my senses and observe myself. All I need to do is watch what I'm doing. For instance, I might see that when I get into a certain situation, I get really agitated. Like my magnet's pointed the wrong way. I gotta get away from that. That tells me something, right? That tells me that I'm wanting to work some kind of magic so that I can not have to look at that, or not have to do that, or not have to be involved in that, right? It may be that as I get on an elevator, my claustrophobic self goes, nope, and the time contracts and everything. So all I need to do, hopefully it's not too long an elevator ride, is ground myself, observe myself, and see what's happening to my field of vision, and feel the whole of me. So that what I'm doing that you might call a symptom is just part of that. Now, instead of going on and being erudite about this, what I want to suggest is that we've got a lot of different magic we can draw on in our lives. And that what all those magics can help us do is to return not to a concentrated view of things, but to a broader picture of who I really am. To see the whole of me, so that then, if part of the whole of me is that bunny rabbit that can be so wonderful on a morning of resurrection, there are all kinds of ways that I can bring that bunny rabbit back into my life without knocking candles over in someone's wonderful sanctuary. Or by deliberately knocking, or by using the candle as a magic wand. There might be different things that work for different people. Doing things the way they're supposed to be done is not what has worked for me. But I love how the candle landed, so we'll say it was a kind of I Ching demonstration with variations. In any case, I've taken enough of your time, but you may find, as you just move forward with your own journey, with your own path, that some of the things I've said may have caught little pieces of you that will unfold over whatever time works for you. You may find that it's like a Polaroid picture. Remember those when we were kids? And so the picture's already there. It's, let's get the air going through. The picture's already there. It's focused. It's clear. It just needs a little bit of time to come out. But when it comes out, then we can say the words that we said differently before. And now, the magic is this, that the old words take on a new meaning. And that all we need is that sound that's already there, that now means exactly what we need. Now you see it.